The bright side of addiction is recovery. And recovery is as recovery does. Recovery is living proof. Welcome to Recovery Coast to Coast. If you are new to our podcast, we welcome you. And if you've been here before, we welcome you back. And if you are in recovery or know or love someone who is, or you simply want to know more about the recovery process, or maybe you're a bit concerned about someone you know or love who is harmfully using alcohol or any other drug, this is the podcast for you, as we carry the message of hope and the promise of recovery. And a reminder, you can find all of our podcasts at recoverycoasttocoast.org. Recent episodes have featured an historic interview with Betty Ford, actor John Larroquette, astronaut Buzz Aldrin, musician Bonnie Raitt, authors Brene Brown, Anne Lamott, J.A. Jance, former NFL players Ryan Leaf and Thomas Hollywood Henderson. All these interviews and more are on our website. Plus, conversations with everyday people in long-term recovery, sharing their story, their insight, and their path. In this edition of Recovery Coast to Coast, we're going to meet a U.S. combat veteran who is making a difference. He went from, in his words, hero to zero. Well, now he's an ambassador for a program called Warrior's Heart, and he is in long-term recovery. Here's a quick clip from today's interview.
I lost a beautiful wife and family and job, and I was homeless, and my father disowned me, so that's why I say hero to zero. And I felt so much guilt and shame at the time. I was struggling. It was right around the 9/11 period, and I was in Manhattan. I lived a quarter mile from the towers, and it went down. So I went to Bali, Indonesia, and I got sober there.
You'll hear from Michael Pugh, this amazing veteran, coming right up. I'm Neil Scott, host of Recovery Coast to Coast. So thankful and filled with gratitude that you've chosen to listen to our podcast. There are many podcasts on recovery. I'm blessed and honored you've chosen to listen to ours. Our website is recoverycoasttocoast.org. Following 17 years of nightly broadcasting on iHeartRadio in Seattle, our podcast features interviews with everyday people in recovery, as well as clinicians, authors, and recovering celebrities who offer the promise of hope and the reality of recovery, plus well-vetted resources for individuals, families, and friends. We invite you to enjoy it and to share it with a friend. Recovery is an American way of life. A reminder, our email address if you'd like to be in touch, and we would love to hear from you, recoverycoasttocoast@comcast.net. Recovery Coast to Coast supported by Sundown M Ranch, one of America's oldest, least expensive, and what's most important, most successful treatment programs. And by the way, Sundown has treated thousands of veterans and their families over the past 55 years. That's right. Sundown has been on the front lines of addiction treatment since way back in 1968. Their legacy is long-term recovery. They're dedicated to the treatment of individuals afflicted with a substance use disorder and to their families who've also been harmed by this disease. Sundown M Ranch is committed to providing treatment of the highest quality at affordable prices by a well-trained and deeply caring staff of experienced professionals. And above all, it's their goal to lead those affected by substance use disorders down the road to recovery and to guide them back to themselves, their families, and their lives. Sundown is located on 30 acres of land that they own at the mouth of the breathtaking Yakima River Canyon. They have successfully treated over 200,000 individuals and their families. Each patient is treated with dignity, respect, and compassion. Their motto is, "The patient is the reason we are here." I've personally referred many individuals to Sundown. Sundown is where recovery begins, sundown.org. There's the coffee pour. It's time. And I invite you to join me now as I pour myself a cup of coffee and share with you my conversations with a proud combat veteran whose greatest victory was over addiction. Michael Pugh is a proud member of the recovery community. Welcome back to Recovery Coast to Coast. Neil Scott again down here in Texas, San Antonio, for the 49th Annual Conference of the Texas Association of Addiction Professionals. And it's a great organization, a great conference. I mean, all sorts of wonderful people with incredible stories. And one of them is Michael Pugh. He's a combat veteran, 100% disabled. He's got an incredible story. He's involved with a program called Warrior's Heart. He'll tell you a little bit about that as well. Michael, welcome to the program. And
Thank you.
let's start with Warrior's Heart. We had some people on from there a couple of years ago, but if you would just give us kind of an overview of that organization.
That's the Warrior class, which is military veterans, first responders, police, firefighters, EMTs, nurses, and the Warrior class. And so Warrior's Heart provides residential treatment center as well as intensive outpatient and sober living. They're the premier Warrior class treatment center in the U.S. They're in Bandera, Texas. They've been there since 2016. They just opened up a new facility outside of Sparta, Virginia.
Wow,
So,
that's a big jump from Texas to Virginia.
Well, they're expanding.
Yeah.
Over 22 veterans commit suicide a day. There's tens of hundreds.
Say that again, 22 veterans?
22 veterans, that's the statistic. It's more than that, but that's on the record, that 22 that commit suicide a day. What's even more shocking is that over 100,000 people died of overdose this past year. And, I was in this conference here in SAMHSA. Over 140,000 died from alcohol-related deaths. And if you put tobacco in there from smoking. So it's 500,000 dead a year.
Yeah.
Over 2 million people wounded. That's people that sought help in a treatment center for either substance use disorder, alcoholism, addiction. So that's 2 million wounded a year, 500,000 dead a year. That's more than all the wars of the past century. That's in 1 year.
I can't wrap my head around those numbers.
Yeah. Shocking, isn't it?
Oh, my goodness. You had told me before we went on the air that you went from hero to zero.
Sure.
What happened?
So, I loved the military. I did 8 years. I'm honorably discharged. I was airborne infantry. I'm a graduate of Airborne Ranger, Jump Master, Jungle Warfare School. Highly decorated for my time that I served. Loved it. And I transitioned to the National Guard and got a college degree. I went to San Diego State. I went on merit scholarship to Oxford, England.
Wow.
And worked in Hollywood for several years, producing music videos, working in the film industry. Then I worked in Manhattan for AT&T when they were a Fortune 10 company as a sales executive. Life was promising. The thing is that I became an alcoholic, meaning that I could no longer control alcohol and drug use. I couldn't put it down. And I struggled. I went to a veterans hospital and got treatment. I was in psych wards, and I was diagnosed with several disorders that I received this 100% disability for that are service-connected, combat-related. Anyways, I lost all that. I lost a beautiful wife and family and job, and I was homeless, and my father disowned me. So that's why I say hero to zero. And I felt so much guilt and shame at the time. I was struggling. It was right around the 9/11 period, and I was in Manhattan. I lived a quarter mile from the towers when it went down. So I went to Bali, Indonesia, and I got sober there.
What was the draw to Indonesia?
Well, I had gone on a holiday there. I had a girlfriend in Hollywood, and she took me there. And it's just a very spiritual place. It's an incredibly spiritual island, and I was doing what we call in recovery a geographical.
That's a major geographical. Holy crap.
And I actually went to my first meeting there, January 17, 2005. I raised my hand, identified as an alcoholic and drug addict.
In Indonesia.
And
Wow.
They have English You know what's great about this program? Is that it's the coolest secret society on planet Earth.
Absolutely.
I can raise my hand.
Yep.
I've gone to meetings in Hong Kong, Singapore, Bangkok, Tokyo, Bali. When I raised my hand in Bali, it's a small community, but people embraced me, and I was like, wow, this is so cool, and I'd go surfing with them, and we would go have dinner together, and the promises happened.
Wow. So how long did you stay in Indonesia, and then what happened?
So it got so good I thought I could drink again.
Oh,
I stopped going to meetings, and then it was a slow burn over a few years. But I was arrested for possession of marijuana, and I was sent to prison in Bali, and it's very corrupt over there. I had to buy my way out. Yeah, I'm blacklisted. I can never return to Indonesia again. Just for 5 grams of marijuana. I was very guilty, though. I mean, I wasn't living. The lifestyle I was living was wrong. But that's what I was arrested for. And I had to buy my way out, meaning I had to pay judges and prosecutors to get out. And so, again, I kind of went back to that zero mentality where I couldn't face myself in America. I just felt so much, guilt and shame. Congratulations. So I went to Thailand. And
another geographic.
Well, yeah, it's the closest thing is Phuket. It's another island.
Yeah.
It's like Bali. But I did go into recovery there for a little while. I got married. But I was in and out of it. I didn't work the steps, and I didn't have a sponsor. I just did it as more of a social thing.
You were working Michael's program.
That's right. That just never seemed to work. So I found out about Warriors Heart. I went to a treatment center in Phuket called Miracles Asia. Incredible program. It's a very small, like 10 to 15 people. So I found out about Warriors Heart, and I knew I needed to get back to America. I wanted to come back. It's like being in a desert, and every once in a while I find an oasis of Americans or people that speak English, and it's, I was so thirsty. I wanted to return to my people, and I knew that I wanted to be in recovery and work with veterans. And then I found out about Warriors Heart, and I was like, please, whatever, just get me in. And they were like, well, we can't get you in right now. So I went to a sober living in LA, which is super hardcore, but good. It's called Puente House, and they have great AA there, but it was a harsh environment for a guy like me. But I stayed sober, and I got to Warriors Heart.
Nice.
It's like entering the gates of Valhalla, right? Like, I'm sitting around this fire, literally, with like 70 warriors, and we're sharing about recovery, and I was like, I arrived. You
found your people.
Yeah, it's like we say, find your tribe.
Yeah.
I'm so blessed. I feel better now at 56 than I ever have in my adult life.
What does recovery mean to you today, Michael?
Recovery means to me, first and foremost, I found a God of my understanding. It's not anyone else's God.
It's Michael's God.
It's a God of my understanding. Yeah. And it's like I tapped into this power, and that power, when I worked these steps with a sponsor, I found freedom. So like recovery to me is freedom, it's connection, and it's service. I love being of service. So yeah, that's what recovery is to me.
Outstanding. Well, you have an amazing story and an amazing journey, and it is just one day at a time. It's all about today.
It's all about the now.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's why it's a present moment, because it's a gift. That's why they call it a present.
That's right.
You couldn't say it any better, brother. I mean,
you're tapped into recovery.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. I appreciate you stopping by. Thank you for the story.
Thank you, sir.
Well, I hope you enjoyed our visit with Michael, who proves that recovery begins with hope. By the way, I want to remind listeners of this podcast, if you'd like to tell your story of recovery, regardless of the path you've chosen, and as long as you've been in continuous recovery for a year or more, please drop us a note at recoverycoasttocoast@comcast.net. Now, coming up next, actor Lou Gossett Jr., a proud man in long-term recovery. He's going to share his thoughts on truth and trust.
Alcohol is running your life. You want help, but can't take time away from work to get it. Where do you turn? Contact Sundown M Ranch. Sundown M Ranch outpatient programs have helped thousands recover from addiction without losing time on the job. Nationally recognized for innovative, effective, and affordable treatment programs, Sundown M Ranch will help you put your life back on track. Go to www.sundown.org to learn more.
And now, as promised, some thoughts on truth and trust from award-winning actor Lou Gossett Jr.
Broken promises, denial, excuses, exaggerations, lies upon lies upon lies. That's how many of us grew up. In our household, fiction rather than fact was the norm. We wouldn't have recognized truth if it stared us in the eye. Our parents lied to each other and for each other. It seemed that they preferred lies to truths, and we followed right along. The whole family lied to hide or sidestep drunkenness, violence, irresponsibility, or other unpleasant realities. We as youngsters lied to get attention, to avoid punishment, to survive. If we didn't grow out of these ingrained habit patterns, we paid a heavy price as adults. Because our lies became even more widespread, it was impossible to keep track of them. We feared getting caught, and often it was unavoidable. People stopped trusting and respecting us. Worse, we no longer trusted or respected ourselves. Needless to say, it's exceedingly difficult to break these lifelong habits. We feel naked and vulnerable without our armor of deceit. Yet we want to move forward, and we know that our ability to function in the world will be severely limited if we don't take actions to become honest and above board in all our affairs. Thought for today: there were times when it seemed that dishonesty made life simpler. I've since learned that nothing is more simple than the truth.
Well, that wraps up this edition of Recovery Coast to Coast, the national podcast. If you've enjoyed our podcast, and I certainly hope you have, please share it with a friend, or simply you can find all of our podcasts at recoverycoasttocoast.org. And if you'd like to get in touch, our email is recoverycoasttocoast@comcast.net. Also, please hit the subscribe or follow button. It's free, and you'll be notified the next time we publish a podcast. Remember, if you know someone who's experiencing problems with alcohol or any other drug, here is a 24-hour national helpline which offers free information and confidential treatment referrals. And yes, they do have Spanish-speaking individuals available as well. The number, 1-800-622-HELP. And we encourage you to check out findsupport.gov. It's a fairly new website designed for individuals, families, and friends, including information on how to pay for treatment, including low-cost and, in some cases, free treatment options. You'll also find free health care support, how to help someone else, or find help for yourself. It's all in one place. Pretty good site. Findsupport.gov. And join us next time for America's Voice for Recovery, Recovery Coast to Coast, the national podcast. And another shout out to our sponsoring organization, the good folks at Sundown M Ranch, where recovery begins. Sundown.org. I'm Neil Scott, reminding you to stay healthy, live in gratitude, and be kind to others. Remember, the bright side of addiction is recovery. Pass it on.